certainly those of you who have friends who were not able to make it right now. So with that said, our panelists are here. So why don't we get started? I want to thank all of you, panelists and participants, for joining us today. My name is Lisa Patterson. I am the Vice Dean for Career Services here at the University at Buffalo School of Law. We have been one of the partners in this program since the very beginning. This will be the 4th year and the 2nd virtual iteration of this event, which has been wonderful for all of our public defender partners. What we wanted to do this year is to add to some of our programming by calling upon some of our experts in the area of hiring for public defense and ask them to tell the participants right out, what are you looking for, and what is the best way to sell yourself, for lack of a better word, to a public defender? How do you interview well with them? So thank you so much for joining us. On the panel today, we have Carrie Phillips, who is from the Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo here in my neck of the woods. We have Sergio De La Pava from New York County Defenders Service, and we have James McGahan. Did I say that right, James? Sorry, you were probably muted.
No, you said it right.
Yeah, great. I'm Irish, so I was hoping I would get it right. From St. Lawrence County, up in that beautiful part of the state. So I've given them some general ideas of the things to ask, but certainly the format today will be fairly open. I have a few questions for you just to make sure we're covering the broad basis, but certainly as our participants have any questions, do feel free. I'll pause occasionally to ask if anyone would like to unmute and ask a question out loud. And as we go along, if you're afraid you're going to forget what you were thinking and you want to throw a question in the chat, please do. I'll be monitoring that and we'll bring it up the next intersection where we can interrupt. So I guess maybe why don't we start in the order I introduced you, Carrie, Sergio, and James. If each of you would like to just tell us a little bit about what do you think makes a successful public defender? Carrie, what comes to mind?
For me, I think the people that are the most successful are the people who are there for really altruistic reasons. They're there to really help people because it is a very difficult job. It can be a very trying job. It's not necessarily a job where you're going to be getting a lot of thanks all day long for all the hard work that you did. It's very fast-paced, fast-moving, stressful situation. And the people who tend to strive in it are the people who are expecting that, and the people who are there to really do as much help as they can to the individuals that they're helping, and not really looking for too much more than that. So the people who have had experience, working within their communities, in that type of environment before, tend to really thrive, I think.
Thank you. Sergio, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think to echo a lot of that, you certainly have to believe in the mission and genuinely believe in it. So you're not going to get any real gratitude. You're not going to get any prestige, and to boot, the pay is terrible. So if you don't believe in the mission and you're not a resilient person who goes into it saying it's about the clients, right? Because that's what we can offer, is access to clients and the magical interaction that you can have with someone when you, who are in a position of privilege, help them deal with what is an incipient tragedy in their life. If that doesn't satisfy some part of you, then I don't really think there's much else that we can offer you. Like I said, it's not a prestigious position. It's not a high paying position. It's not one where you're showered with gratitude from clients all the time. So when we're hiring, what we look for is people who have identified this as a genuine mission in their life and are going to draw satisfaction from that.
James?
Yeah, very similar to Carrie and Sergio. Compassion for people and caring for people, and just the fight against injustice and making sure people are represented thoroughly and fairly as they go through this traumatic experience, which ultimately is what it is. So that's kind of what we look for, and a willingness to put the hard work in, not someone that's looking to kind of have an easy government job in my setting. So it's a difficult job, and that's hopefully we can have someone with a great work ethic.
Thank you. Well, that was by way of kind of a cold open on my part before I actually got into asking you to actually introduce yourselves. So I know I said your names, but if you wouldn't mind, let's go through again. Could you just tell us a short bio, tell us a little bit about yourself, and also what drew you to this kind of work? Maybe we can go backwards this time. James, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I'm James McGann. I'm the public defender in St. Lawrence County. I've been in this job for about 3 years, but been in public defense my whole career, so about 8 years. I kind of fell into this work. I went into an internship when I graduated law school, and really enjoyed it at the Greene County Public Defender's Office, and I can't imagine doing anything else at this point. I like representing people, even though it's kind of thankless, but doing this is probably my passion now.
Thank you. Sergio, we'll get you out of the middle eventually, but how about you go next?
I'm Sergio Della Pava. I'm the legal director at New York County Defender Services, a public defender office in Manhattan. You know, when I was in law school, I did an internship at the Legal Aid Society in Brooklyn. As I mentioned earlier, I became very almost addicted to this magic of representing someone in a criminal case, and I've been doing it for about 25 years since.
Thank you, Sergio. Carrie?
And I'm Carrie Phillips. I am currently a managing attorney in the Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo, our criminal defense unit, which is the public defender's office in Erie County. I sort of did the opposite of James in that I fell into another kind of work and then came back to this work. So I did an internship my second year of law school. When I was at UB Law School, I got the BPILP grant for the summer, and I came to the public defender's office, and I had a practice order, and I just absolutely loved it. It was the best job. It just felt like the exact thing I wanted to do. And then I graduated from law school in 2009. My 3L summer, I did an internship at a big law firm, mostly because I wanted to make money that third year summer and pay for my third year of law school. But by the end of law school, there was a financial crisis in 2009. I got a job offer at the big firm, so I took it because it was hard to get a job anywhere at that point. So I ended up starting out in big law in New York City. But after being there for about 3 years, which it was a good experience, I decided that, you know, I wasn't really doing what I really love to do every day. And I kind of remembered that internship that I did in law school. So I came back to Buffalo and got a job in the public defender's office. I did the misdemeanor unit for a few years, and then I was promoted up to the felony unit. And then I became a managing attorney a couple of years ago. So now we do a lot of hiring, and I am in charge of the training of all of the new people that come into our office. And this year I am running for Buffalo City Court Judge. So I'm on the ballot for next week. So it's been a big, exciting year.
Congratulations. Good luck. We're all pulling for you here in Buffalo. Thank you all. So for those who are on the call, hoping to prepare for this Friday and for their subsequent interviews with public defenders, I want to get a little bit into sort of what we can do to prepare these folks to put their best foot forward. So, you know, in terms of what they may expect to be asked and what is the best way that you have found to ask people questions that would reveal to you the types of qualities that you're looking for? Sergio, do you have any go-to techniques for what you ask people?
I mean, usually if we are interviewing someone, it's because they've demonstrated through internships or through other means great interest in this kind of work. So we take that as a given. If there's not that, it's unlikely I'll be interviewing you because we get a great deal of applicants. But you have to give the applicant the opportunity to expound on why they're so interested in this kind of work. So that, I mean, I don't think that question would take anybody by surprise. It certainly feels like fair game. Like I see from your resume and maybe your cover letter that you're very interested in indigent defense. Why? And then just sit back and really open-ended questions, right? Not the kind of questions we do on cross, but the kind of questions we do on direct. Go ahead. I'm not going to fill it in for you. Tell us why. Forget our office, forget, this particular candidacy. Just tell us why you want to do this kind of work. And that is, an incredibly fruitful question for gauging whether or not you're, as I said earlier, you're really dealing with someone who has a passion for it, as opposed to somebody who just really very much wants to have a job when they graduate.
Carrie, do you have any other things that you do in an interview?
Yeah, I kind of did the same thing as Sergio with the open-ended question. So I think people are sometimes underprepared for that. They kind of expect a more direct question, or maybe for somebody to bounce right off of something from their resume, so that it's a little bit easier to answer. So a lot of times they're like, it's a big question and they don't really know where to hone in on. So I would sort of prepare yourself by going through your resume and sort of trying to see what based on what's on your resume, what else are we going to want to know about you? So there's might be something that you do in your personal life that has a lot of bearing that didn't necessarily make your resume, that shows that you're, a person that works in the community, or that you're a person who's done a lot of work with vulnerable populations, or you're just a person who was raised in a certain way that makes you particularly suited to do this kind of work. So you should really kind of think of those things before the interview starts, so that you know what you want to highlight and make sure you work it into the answers. Especially if you're getting all of these open-ended questions, you can really paint what you want to say. If you're not getting these really direct questions, you have to make sure that everything you want said about you gets put into the question. So it takes some preparation on the interviewees and to sort of decide what they want us to know about you, and make sure that it makes your way into the question. Don't rely on us interviewing you to be able to pull it out of you, because that's not necessarily what we're doing or what we're really able to do in the time period that we have to interview you.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is, don't be passive in this process. Take an active role in what you've decided your best argument for yourself is. And if the interviewer is not asking the right questions that you hope that they would ask, don't be afraid to volunteer that information. Is that fair, Carrie?
Yeah, and absolutely. And really take advantage of the end. Everybody always, I'm sure everybody here asks, do you have any questions of us? Because you can really get a lot of information out about yourself when you ask the questions about the program. When you've looked into Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo and see what services we offer and show an interest in that, you can really set yourself apart from the other people interviewing.
Thank you. James, do you have any questions or techniques that you go to when you're interviewing?
One of the things that I got asked, and I've adopted it in mine, is and people on this that watch it, and if they interview, they're going to ask them this. It's what is your favorite fictional character? And it can be from anything, who it is and why, and I'll time it. If they answer very quickly and give a good reason why, it shows that they can think on their feet, which is very important in this job, because you never know when a client's going to either throw something off the rails, the judge, the prosecutor. And we found that giving that character kind of gives a little insight into their personality. And gets to know them a little bit. And there's a throwaway answer with anyone that really wants to be in the public defense field. You can always say Atticus Finch, and I think you should be able to get that in 30 seconds. But same with Carrie and Sergio. We're a little bit different environment. We don't have as many applicants because we're in the North Country. So it's really just being loose, expressing yourself, and just showing how and why you want to be in this agency.
Thank you. I'm gonna start with you again, James, with a follow-up, which is, some students who are starting this process, maybe first or second years, are new to this area of practice, so they don't have a lot to point to on their resume that's directly relevant, but may have things that are transferable. So if you see something on someone's resume like, retail or service jobs, or possibly student activities, what is the best way for people to make the most out of those things on their resume that would impress you in terms of being able to use those as an example that they could do your job? Any thoughts, James? Have you run into that with candidates?
Yeah, so anytime you're dealing with another another person. So if you're in retail, likely if you're employed retail, there's been some sort of conflict. So if you can demonstrate how a conflict and how you resolved it, in particular, if you did it in a patient way and listened, and worked with them or just explained and how exactly you handled that situation, it's transferable. And a lot of people, even if they don't have that, we deal with a lot of mentally ill people, and drug addiction. So many people have that in their lives. So just because you don't have the relevant dealing with that, you still have the experience, even if it's not on your resume, like Carrie said in the last question.
Sergio, do you have any thoughts? Have you talked to people who have had a really great way of describing some of their maybe non-legal jobs?
I love focusing on those kind of details, but again, with the open-ended question, I might say something like, "I see you were the regional manager for Target. What was that like?" And just really it's really about giving the candidate an opportunity to somehow tie it into what we do, right? So tie the skills that were required and the training that perhaps that was required in that position to tie it into what we do. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the outside the box detail, perhaps in a resume or in a cover letter. I usually at the end, where candidates put like a personal thing, like skateboarding champion of ACC. I always bring that up because first of all, it's fun, and it's, you do a lot of interviews, and any kind of odd detail is always going to catch my attention. But it's also giving the candidate an opportunity to shine that, in terms of like their personal, more of their personality can shine through if you're not asking the same questions that they've heard in 17 different interviews.
Thanks. Carrie, as you're training new attorneys, are you finding that any of their non-legal backgrounds have proved helpful to them as they, start learning the ropes and learning what to do?
Yeah, in fact, I find people that have worked in the service industry, or especially like in like a high volume, like a restaurant, or something like that. And maybe I'm biased because I did that before I went to law school, but it shows in a work ethic, and it shows in being able to handle like a high volume, high stress situation. Sometimes when you're in court and you have 50 cases on in the morning, it's different, substantively what you're doing, but being able to handle 50 things at one time and 30 people at the same time, and some people yelling at you and some people being nice to you, is a very transferable skill when you are talking about working in a really busy courtroom. So, I think you can find any job that you've done. Don't be afraid not to talk about it during the interview. If you can say something like that it got you to work with a very diverse group of people that you were able to work with, and that was a good experience for you. If you're able to say that it helped, form your work ethic and how you need to, work hard and think fast on your feet. All of those things are helpful in any job, and particularly in being a public defender, because of the high volume that we have and the sort of high stress situation that we work in the courtroom. So I would say not to be afraid to use all of your background and experience. You can really explain anything like that and show how it could be helpful for you in the current job.
Thank you. Turning to a little bit of prep that the candidates can be doing. I know, Carrie, you already alluded to some of the things that they can be preparing for in terms of reviewing their background and getting prepared for some answers. Maybe also with an eye towards whether there's anything specific to being on video or being on Zoom. Are there any other things that you would all recommend that people do to prepare? Sergio, do you have any recommendations?
I don't think I'm breaking any ground here when I say that it's probably a good idea to do your research on the office you're applying for, right? So, if you are interviewing with legal aid in Manhattan and you say, I'm really looking forward to be part of a small office, I think you just hurt your candidacy. They have 2,200 employees. So you should know what the interviewer's office life is best. Usually the website is a good way. If you can talk to somebody who worked in that environment, that could be useful. But you want to tailor your interview to the needs of the interviewer. So that requires a bit of research. And I gotta say, maybe it's a it's a shortcut or whatever you want to call it. I always find it impressive when a candidate really seems to understand the makeup of our office, how it's set up, either because they've spoken to somebody or they went on the website and spent an hour on it. It does kind of bump you up a bit because it communicates to the interviewer that you're that kind of person who, when given a task, you do your homework, because guess what? That's kind of what the job you're interviewing for is like, right? So there's really no substitute for the kind of person who takes every task very seriously and does their research before engaging in it. So you've basically demonstrated that you're that kind of person when you do that at an interview.
Thank you. James, anything that you would recommend people do?
I got multiple screens and my cursor had moved over to a different one. What I
hear
would
ya.
say is, if you're doing Zoom, make sure the environment is presentable. Make sure there's no things. Certainly, if there's something interesting in the background, I'm probably going to ask about it. So if you have a poster or something in your background, just little things like that. Just be confident. Try to be. It's a serious matter, but be as laid back as you can. Just like Sergio said, do your homework on the organization. I'd say don't be afraid to necessarily apply to agencies that are outside of your comfort zone, and talk to everyone.
Since I have you on the hook, James, sometimes some of the smaller organizations don't have as much robust information online about the organization as maybe like the Manhattan Legal Aid would have. Do you have any recommendations on how to research some of the smaller county offices?
I think it largely depends on each county. I know my county has a website that's relatively up to date, probably not as up to date as others, but there's definitely ones that aren't. Research the area, look into, just Google the area itself. So if you Google my area, you'll see lots of articles about like Mary Rain and a number of interesting criminal justice matters that are happening. So just Google the area, Google what's going on in that county, and talk to them. The interviewer about it, they'll know what they are, and if it shows some interest in what's going on there, you can it kind of switches the dynamic a little bit to where they're going to be answering questions from you, but it also shows you're interested in the job and the area.
Thank you. Carrie, any thoughts about preparation?
Yeah, I would say if you're applying to, somewhere where you're not currently living or you don't really have a strong connection to be prepared to be able to express that you're actually interested in moving there. Sometimes I think we are unsure if people are sort of applying to our office as maybe as like a backup, or they're spreading a wide net, and we're not really sure based off of their resume or what they're saying if they're really willing to move to Buffalo. Maybe we look at their resume and there's really no connection there. And we're starting to get people to come here from all over the country, which is exciting, but it's hard to tell who's actually interested or not. But we'll ask things about how people how they plan on, for instance, they're taking the bar somewhere else, and how they plan on getting admitted in New York. And if they don't know how to do that, then it doesn't really seem like they're serious about moving to New York State from whatever state they're in, or moving to Buffalo per se. So if you have a connection to Buffalo that's not express on your resume, or a connection to anywhere else that you're applying that's not clear, I would make sure that that gets expressed sometime during the course of the interview, so that they know that you're someone that they should be spending time on, because you have a real interest in moving, if moving is something that you're going to be having to do in order to take the job.
That's a really great point. For those of you who are from not New York or not from near here, it is a lot of effort for an employer to hire and onboard people. So they're hoping that you'll stay for a while, if not a really long time, because they won't have to do it again, right? So it's not just an academic question. Are you from here? Do you want to actually work here? They don't want to lose you too soon, because that's a lot of time and effort and even money expended on someone who didn't really pay off. So Sergio, do you see the same thing in the New York City area? I feel like you have a little more latitude because New York City people tend to assume everybody wants to be there, but do you need as strong a connection or excuse for being in New York as maybe the other counties?
I mean, we're in Manhattan, so we kind of assume that you're willing to live in Manhattan. So that's not the big issue. But to Carrie's point, sometimes we get applications from people who are practicing in other jurisdictions already. If you're not admitted to the New York bar, you better be ready in that interview to explain to me how you're going to get admitted, right? I've had candidates say to me, well, I don't know, how do I do that? And I said, this is not the right role. You have to tell me why I can hire you and you can practice in New York. So I would say the same thing, to a lesser extent when you're interviewing somebody from a law school in Texas, for example. I do take the time to say, and you intend to take the New York bar, to confirm that, because it is difficult. New York is one of the more difficult bars to be admitted into. The bar exam is difficult, and you know, the reciprocity isn't the way it is in a lot of other states. So yeah, a path to actually practicing. Be ready to answer that question. Do your, again, research. I go back to research. You know, our appellate divisions tell you what you need to do to practice in New York. You should have that at your fingertips.
Thank you. I want to pause at this point and see if any of our participants would like to either unmute and ask a question or put one in the chat, which you can do at any time, by the way. But does anyone have a question they'd like to say out loud? Marshall? I see you have your hand up.
Yes, howdy. First off, thank you guys for being here. I've thought that this was very helpful already so far. We talked a little bit about the questions that you should ask and the prep that you should do for coming into interviews. In that vein, is there a question that you wish that you asked during your interview and when you were applying to be first year public defenders? And then following up with that, is there a question that you wish every applicant asked?
It's a good question. Anybody want to take that?
I think questions from applicants is one of my favorite part, because listen, we're all in the same, we're all choosing from the same pool. Many times people that we make offers to have offers from other organizations, right? And they have to decide between it. So that's the opportunity for us to distinguish ourselves if possible, and kind of put forth our philosophy for what we're looking for. For example, we hire, and we specifically call, we are hiring trial attorneys. So that's a very specific way of naming our applicants. So hint, hint, you better be prepared to answer how you view the mechanism of trials and whether that's something that appeals to you. So that's a very common question from applicants, like, well, you know, what's your office like? What's the culture like? And that's our opportunity to kind of reinforce what it is that we're looking for, just so that it's clear, right? I mean, there's a lot of offices and ours may just not be the one that's best for you. So I love that question. It's pretty much 100% hit rate that every applicant has basically been taught to ask that, but we do give that opportunity as well to our applicants to let us know how to the extent possible, we can give them an idea of what our culture is like and what day-to-day life is like in our office.
And, you know, I always really like when people ask about something, especially if they're coming from a different jurisdiction, different state, ask, you know, like a timely question that makes it seem like they are keeping up with the relevant areas of law and change in the area. Like people have been, even this week, have been asking me, you know, how are things going in court, you know, now that there's bail reform, or how has your office been impacted by you know, the COVID closures that happened for a while, like what's happening now. That sort of genuine interest in what's happening with the office and the area of law just shows that you are really interested in that area, because you are keeping up with it to that extent.
Yeah, I would agree with both those. Any question that's directed kind of about either the area, the agency, or just general criminal practice, and their feel on it shows that you care about the type of work you're going into, that you're interested in the job and the area. So those are all great questions to just show your interest. That's really an opportunity for you to show that and distinguish yourself.
Great question, great answers. Thanks, everyone. Anyone else have a question? Please feel free to just unmute yourself and speak up. I see someone in the chat. Any advice on how to prep for interview hypotheticals? So first, I guess the first question is, does anyone ask hypotheticals in this group, or do you think many public defenders do? And if yes, what's the best way to prep? I'll leave it up to whoever thinks they might do them. Does anyone do hypotheticals?
I mean, we do some hypotheticals, but I think the point of them is for you to be able to think on your feet. So I don't know how you could well prepare for them. Although I guess it would be, the more prepared you are for the interview overall, for me, the more prepared I am for anything, the less nervous I am. And then the more comfortable I am kind of doing a comfortable back and forth. So I guess just being prepared in general would prepare you to be relaxed and be able to, you know, be in the mindset to really be able to think on your feet easily. But I don't really know how else you could prepare for the hypotheticals. Ours are designed for you to have to think on your feet. So they're not the same, and they switch, and sometimes it just comes up naturally in the conversation. So I don't know substantively how you would prepare for those.
Yeah, the hypotheticals we have asked in the past, and we don't always ask them, is just how you deal with a conflict or some sort of situation. It's not necessarily on point with the law. It's more, what would you do if you and a client disagreed, or something like that, or you and an office person disagreed? How would you handle that situation? And kind of go from there. But that's really the extent of our hypotheticals, I guess.
Sergio, yes or no on hypotheticals in your office?
We do, I assume what you mean by hypotheticals are ones that are conveyed orally right there in the moment, and you're asked to give a response. We do ask people to do parts of the job, but we give them notice and we give them the materials beforehand at later interviews. The hypotheticals maybe are used at the first interview. Here's where I think we're at cross purposes here. The hypothetical is designed to make you think on your feet and kind of shock you and upset you and see how you react to that. So how do you prepare for it? You shouldn't, you know, we don't want you to prepare for it. That's kind of like the short answer. That's kind of like saying, I'm going to sit down right now and write some ad libs. That's not the spirit of it.
It sounds like just knowing they might happen is preparation enough. Just sort of bracing yourself.
Think about who's asking it and what they do for a living and what they, you know, what they might be impressed by in terms of an answer. That's the best I can give you.
That's great. Sergio, you made an allusion to the later parts of the interview process. So I'm assuming most of you, today we'll be dealing mostly with that first contact, maybe the first initial interview. It sounds like your office has various stages after that in which you might be doing something like an opening statement or some other piece of the case, as you said. Can you tell us more about your process there for hiring?
The first, we have a 3-step process generally. This is for, I guess we're focusing on 3 Ls, right? So we have a different process for what we call laterals, meaning people who are already admitted in some state or in practicing. For 3 Ls, we have a first round interview, which is done usually with attorneys in our office, you know, experienced attorneys in our office. And that's seems to me the kind of interview we're mostly discussing today. That does have potentially a hypothetical. It does have often a group setting like Equal Justice Workshop, I think it's called. I don't participate in many of those, so forgive my lack of knowledge. But at that point, a list will be generated of people who are getting a second interview. That will take place with somebody from Human Resources and usually 2 supervising attorneys. There will be an exercise. You will be given materials. You will be asked to do something that is part of our job. And then if you get selected for a 3rd round interview, you'll meet with 2 directors, myself and someone else, or 2 others. There's 3 of us. And there you will give a summation to us as if we were the jury. Again, you'll be given the materials in advance, not way in advance, probably 24 to 48 hours before.
That's great. And do you hire for summers, and is that more of a truncated process?
For the intern hiring is similar to the, you know, that first round process I described. I don't know much about it, to be honest with you. They just, again, I think it's probably the same crew that does the Equal Justice stuff. And they just tell us, here are the 8 interns. I will say that for us, you know, maybe 40% of our class that starts in the fall every year after Labor Day consists of people who have interned in our office. So I don't mean to say that that's not a critical process. It's very critical. It's a real leg up, apparently, if you look at the data, to have interned for us, because surprise, surprise, you get to show us your work. What could be better than that? So if you intern for us, you're pretty much guaranteed to advance to the second round at least.
2-month interview, basically. James, do you have a different process when you're both looking at summers and even an entry level?
Summers, we're way in the North Country, so basically, if someone is located here and they're interested in interviewing and interning, we do interview them. It's a one-step process. Really, it's just to figure out what they're looking for. We do have regular interns, but we only have 1, maybe 2 a year, or a semester, depending on the year. We take undergrad and legal for that process. It's fairly informal. We talk and make sure you're interested, and then we'll pretty much give anyone that's looking a try in that scenario. The regular interview for someone to come in would be, usually it's a 2-step process. Either there's a one-on-one interview with me, and then a group to really see if everyone will fit in and work together, because we're small. So it's almost more important to fit into the office culture than it is necessary. We can teach people, and if they're interested and they've made it through that step, we think we can train them to the extent we're going to need them there. So it's really a 2-step, the culture and making sure people are going to work well and really want to be here. So those are our 2 steps.
Thank you. Carrie, how does legal aid onboard people or interview people?
Ours is almost identical to Sergio's, so I won't bother repeating through the process, but we do have, we talk to people at the conferences, and that usually helps get them the first interview. And then we do have a second interview with a smaller group. And usually in the second interview, we give you something that we do within our job assigned to you probably 2 days ahead of time, where you're going to prepare to do that at a closing or a sentencing or something that you're going to have a couple days to prepare for and do for us at the interview.
Great, thank you. We do have a question in the chat that it is, approximately when do your respective offices make their decisions on who is getting an offer for employment? And I would sort of put a little bit of editorial on that to say both for summer and for entry level if possible. Another way to think about it, I guess, is once you get the process started, how long does it take to get to the offer stage, if that's a better way to think about it in your situation. So Carrie, any thoughts on when the offers generally go out?
We are planning to get our offers out. We're planning on doing the first and second round interviews in February and March, and to have our offers out in April.
And this is for the next entry level class?
Correct, for our entry level class, which would start September of 2022.
And for summer?
I actually don't know that answer offhand. I apologize. I'm just not sure. That's a separate process that I was not involved in last year, and I just don't remember the timing off the top of my head.
Summers do tend to be rolling at a lot of places, just in my experience with not just public defenders, but other not-for-profits. So I'll throw that out there just as a possible answer, depending on where you're looking. James, any timing thoughts? Do you work differently than that?
Yeah, we don't really have a class system. We basically go by when we have openings. So when we have an opening, we try to fill it as fast as possible. I would say it takes about a month to just time everything, and it largely depends on how many applicants we have. So if you applied now and you were admitted, it's very well possible you could start by the end of the year here, assuming all the processes, everything works out and everything comes back. Summers, it's kind of rolling. If you're up here and looking to intern, we'll figure that out. We have a plan with the appellate division to supervise law interns, so that's pretty easy.
That's great. So it's like a practice order you can get if you summer there?
Yeah, so we have a practice, the third department doesn't have a practice orders per individual anymore. It has it for the office. We have a plan with them at this point.
Nice. So for our students on the call, that basically means if you're not in New York, that may be a term you haven't heard before, but it basically means they give you stuff you usually have no business doing. But you get to do some stuff that lawyers tend to do. Sergio, what's timing like in your office?
I don't know the answer to the summer question at all, so I'm not gonna start guessing. As far as the classes that start right after Labor Day, there's some variance there because of budget questions and things of that nature. COVID it's obviously still a factor in some ways. I would say if you want to be part of our 2022 fall class, you should be getting your materials in like right now. And so we'll probably try to do these 3 rounds before the end of the calendar year, and then maybe offers would be early next year, like in January, around that. That's just a general timeline. I mean, that can change. And yeah, by the way, just a tip, if you apply to Office X and that's your first choice, and then Office Y gives you an offer, you should probably let Office X know and give them a timeline. It has worked out in the past for some people. It doesn't work for everyone, but it has worked out for some people. If you put us under the gun, I hope this part isn't being recorded. If you put us under the gun because you have an offer somewhere else, it may result in you getting an offer from us quicker. But you didn't hear that from me.
We actually advise our students to do that, so I'll take the heat for that one. All right, if there are, please do feel free to keep putting questions in the chat. Anyone else want to speak up before we move on? Okay, I just have a couple of wrap-up questions. One is just because we're going to be on video still for a while, and certainly our event on Friday is on Zoom. Is there anything that you would recommend to students specifically to help show their personality or make a good impression in this very artificial video environment? Is there anything you've seen people do successfully that helps with that or that has impressed you? Carrie, have you seen anything online?
I think just in general, and as someone who myself has had to do a lot of interviews over Zoom for like endorsements and stuff this year and for different organizations, I think you have to overdo it. I think everything you do gets subdued over Zoom. So if you're the kind of person who is not very emotive, you have to make an extra effort, or else you're going to look like you don't care, unfortunately, because you lose some of that in person. So I think you just have to take an extra effort to look like you're engaged in what's happening, and you have to make an extra effort to look interested in what you're saying or like enthusiastic about what you're saying, because everything you're doing, you're losing some of it, especially when we're going to do the hypotheticals, like if you're doing a mock closing or a sentencing or something. It's easy to look less impassioned about what you're saying when it's going on over Zoom.
Thank you. And while I have you, Carrie, we have a question about the Buffalo office in the chat. Referring to, Sergio had said that his new 3L class is usually 40% people who interned in the office before. Is it similar in Buffalo, or do you have a better shot at getting hired if you have interned there before?
No, but that's where we're looking to go. So we're really just beefing up our internship program so that hopefully it will become starting to feed into our hiring class. We are really working on that now, and I think that will be the case in the future. And we are trying to, create a better link between our interns and people coming back to work here, and keeping in touch with those people, because we have had people who have done a really good job over the summer that we wish we would have kept some sort of connection to. So it's not true now. In fact, I don't know, it's probably more like 10%, but I anticipate over the next few years it reaching more into those numbers.
Thank you. Sergio, we were talking about how to make an impression on Zoom. Any thoughts on your end?
It's gotten a lot easier. I'll tell you, before the pandemic, if I was doing an interview, we used to do them via Skype, really. My heart sank a bit that it was not going to be any kind of productive process, and in person was by far the standard. Now, I mean, if you can do it in person, please do that. If it's at all possible, try to do it in person. Our office is open. We do in person, but if Zoom is unavoidable, you're in California and the office is in New York, then I think some good advice is what Carrie just said, which is like, understand that it's on video. You have to be speak clearly, speak loudly, have an appropriate background, dress appropriately as if you were, believe it or not, as if you were coming into the office. And then I think right now it's the lowest barrier there's ever been, because let's face it, we're all on 17 Zooms a day anyway. So
That's true. We're much better at it. James, any other hints or tips?
Yeah, everything that Sergio and Carrie said is on point. We've been doing Zoom interviews for a little while, or Skype, depending on just based on where we are. It takes someone a full day, pretty much wherever they're coming from, to get up here, and that's probably partially because when I interviewed, I drove 4 hours up here and then sat for about 3 hours while the person that was interviewing me was in court, because everyone here is practicing in court every day, pretty much. So it's just be patient and let your personality show. I think everyone's used to being on video at this point and doing what they need to do through Zoom or Teams or whatever video conference you use.
James, I think you mentioned earlier in the talk that, if you have a poster behind you, people will ask about it. That can be a good or bad thing, right? So just make sure you know what it looks like behind you. Put a filter up like I have, if that's something that you want to do. I meet with a lot of students, even just for counseling over Zoom. And it's amazing how many times, we've had something in common based on something I've seen in their background that has led to a nice conversation. So those are all great tips. So I will leave the group with one last request, which is, what else would you like to share to help students prepare? Is there anything that we haven't given you a chance, advice that we haven't given you a chance to give them? Sergio, any parting thoughts and pearls of wisdom?
Oh, I mean, we look forward to hearing from you guys. The one thing that's changed, I think, that I didn't get the opportunity to say is, there's a lot more interest from law students in what we do than there probably has ever been. In a lot of ways, it's very gratifying to see. In a lot of other ways, personally, it can be a little disheartening to have to turn people away who will do a great job. You just know that they would knock it out of the park, but unfortunately, there's probably 10 people who want the job for every one that you hire. I wish we had the budget to hire everybody. So understand that competitiveness is coming from a good place. It's coming from people finally realizing how unjust our criminal justice system has been for decades and wanting to take an active role in that. So all that is incredibly gratifying to me as somebody who's been doing this for a quarter century. I remember when the main thing you had to demonstrate was that you really wanted to do the job, and that was the end of the interview. So that's changed a lot. I wish you guys all the best, and look forward to seeing your materials.
Thank you. And for those who don't get into Sergio's office, do try some of the other counties in New York. Not all of them have the huge footprint of applicants that some of the larger counties do. And so if you're really, really dedicated to this work, do be geographically flexible, because they really do need you. And that's one of the reasons this event exists, to help them find people that will come out to where they are. So with that said, James, driving 4 hours to your office, do you have any parting wisdom for our participants?
Basically, because I've been in job fairs in person, virtually, don't knock the small offices. Don't be afraid to come to the rural areas. I know lifestyle is a little different, but the one thing you'll get is you're going to be thrown into stuff that you probably shouldn't be, but we need you. So you're going to handle felonies very early on. You're going to touch cases that are complex, and work on stuff. You're going to get a lot of experience very quickly. It's not the volume of the bigger offices that can separate, but you're going to be involved in really difficult and research heavy cases immediately up in a rural county, because basically we don't have the bodies to do that, to have a separation. So everyone's on board and we function as a team, and whoever has the best idea, no idea is wrong, and just get you on board, and you can help us represent people in a rural community.
Thank you. And Carrie from the Queen City in New York State, our second biggest city in Buffalo, any last bits of wisdom for our group?
Or just in general, say just to be yourself during the interview. Sometimes you're talking to someone and it seems like they're trying to force themselves to be some, not be their own natural self. And that always comes through when you're talking to someone who's being genuine and really just being true to their own personality. That really kind of shines through. So don't try to force yourself to, if you're a quieter person, you don't have to be a loud person because you want to be a trial attorney per se. Like, I'm just throwing out an example there, but be yourself and sell yourself, and don't try to make yourself sound like someone that you're not, because then you're not going to come across as very genuine and likable. And that's something that's always being assessed during an interview. And I would just also say that I always like to get a follow-up from the person. Sometimes we're very close afterwards. A lot of times our problem is we liked way too many people, and that it's hard for us to even make that decision. And sometimes a little bit of a follow-up email thanking you for the interview and saying that you really enjoyed hearing X, Y, and Z about the office, or maybe you realized you forgot to say something you did want to say about yourself, and you can sort of insert that there, will maybe make you set apart from some of the other people that you're very close to maybe getting an offer from. So I think it's definitely worth it to have some follow-up.
Quickly on that, Carrie, do you find it appropriate if someone asks for your contact information during an interview, especially in a situation like this where you may not be able to hand them a card or they may not have anything else to go on?
Yeah, and in fact, that's been happening to me frequently this week. In fact, sometimes people have asked me questions about the office that I didn't know the answer from, so I would ask them for their contact information so that I could follow up after the interview. But yeah, people have asked me for my email or my phone number, and I've given it over Zoom. So
thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been an amazing panel. I hope that our participants realize what real rock stars we have in the public defense community, and I appreciate all three of you being here. Congratulations to all of you participants who are coming to the fair and who have chosen this as your area of specialty. It's a wonderful, wonderful way to be a lawyer, and you're going to be doing great work. So thanks, everyone. I hope to see you all on Friday, and I really appreciate everyone's time today. Have a good evening.